Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I got a very special video to shoot today, and it's a little bit of a departure from what I usually do, but I'm going to head into town. It's about a mile that way and get up close to the railroad tracks because the Union Pacific 4014 big boy steam locomotive is set to roll through in about 30 minutes. Now, if you're not familiar with the 4014 big boy, you probably should be. It's honestly probably the most photographed and recorded train in the United States right now. And Union Pacific has spent the last few years doing a ground-up restoration on this thing. I've been following it online for the last couple of years, and I never dreamed it would be rolling through just a mile from where I live. I mean, machines like this are my celebrities. There isn't much that gets me as excited as seeing something like this, and something that I've followed for the last couple of years. It's really an amazing piece of machinery. But the reason they call it the big boy, like I said, largest steam locomotive ever made. Bare engine weighs 1.2 million pounds, and if you fill its fuel tender full of the 28 tons of coal and 24,000 gallons of water that it would consume in an average shift, that brings it up to an even 1.5 million pounds. Generates about 7,000 horsepower, and it's basically two engines in one. The front engine powers 8 driving wheels, and then there's an articulated joint which connects it to the second engine, which powers an additional 8 driving wheels. There's a lot of motion going on when this thing rolls down the tracks. It's really something to see, and the whistle is just astounding. You hear it and you feel it. It shakes the ground. It's really an amazing machine. So anyway, I need to quit talking. It's time to get into town. There's a train to catch. But for the rail fans out there, I'll give you a little bit of a throwback to some of the language back from my conductor days when I was on the rails myself. This is BNSF line, Hinckley Subdivision, MP 48.2, Carrick Station, Union Pacific 4014, southbound on the main. You can hear them. He's probably blowing for the Klein Road up there right now. That's only about a quarter mile away. Crossing arms are coming down. He must have tripped the shunt. Totally worth the ringing in the ears. Oh my God, that thing's awesome. You can feel that whistle right in your chest. It's unreal. The ground shakes and everything else. Let's see if we can hop on down to Asco, catch him on that double crossing. Okay guys, made it down to Asco. We're about 10 minutes ahead of it. We got a nice double crossing, one right here, another one right down there. This is where I watched him go through last Friday, and it sounds pretty good when he hits these two crossings. He pretty much just gets done blowing for the first one. He's got to start right back up again for this one. So we'll hang out here. Hopefully not too many people will get in the way of the shot. steam locomotive is very simple in its elements: earth, fire, air, water. But by a sort of alchemy, these were wrought into a creature that changed the course of history forever. Now, those are not my words. I could never come up with anything that clever. But from the instant I heard them, they just stuck, because in my mind, there is no better way to articulate what a steam locomotive is. And it's interesting because I like the way they call it a creature. They seemed as though they were very much alive. They worked, they toiled, they wore out, they grew old, and they very much breathed, and they very much communicated, especially to the men that operated them back in the heyday of steam. It was very common for an engineer and a fireman to have their engine, their locomotive, and they would take that same machine out every time and bring it back, and almost every day. And it was to the point where they could listen to what it was telling them. They knew by the feedback that that locomotive was giving them how they had to operate it, what they had to do. The fireman knew if he needed to stoke the firebox, adjust the draft. He was always maintaining a good head of steam, always varying it according to load. The engineer could tell by the clatter of the rods and the vibration in the floorboards, you know, what he needed to do for throttle, for brake, for everything. And it was like a constant communication between man and machine. And these crews, these men that ran these locomotives, very much built a bond with their engine. And because, you know, they spent most of their time with it, probably more time than they did with their own families. And when the transition from steam to diesel electric happened, for a lot of these men, you know, they did not call the scrap yards a scrapyard. They called it the graveyard, because they had built such a bond with their engine, working the steam, running the steam, that it was a very emotional experience for those guys when they were forced out of steam and had to accept the diesel electric changeover. And I want to direct you guys to a documentary that was done. I'll put a link in the description below. You can click right on it, go over and watch it. I highly recommend it. It was made, I believe, in 1961 in Canada, when they finally, nationwide in Canada, transitioned away from steam and did the diesel electric changeover. And I'll tell you guys, that documentary is perfect. I don't know that I've ever watched a better, more entertaining, yet an enjoyable documentary on anything. It's not boring at all. It's very, very interesting. But I can really relate to the men that they interviewed back in 1961 in Canada that had built a life on running the steam, working the steam, and were being forced to adapt and adopt new technology in the name of progress. And we may very well be entering into a time similar to that ourselves, with all the talk of getting away from fossil fuels and going with this, you know, renewable energy. And you could kind of tell that little eye roll I did right there. But, you know, I'm kind of in the same position that they were. I've pretty much built a career, spent my life mastering the realm of internal combustion, and that goes hand in hand with fossil fuels. And personally, I cannot fathom a world where I do not have internal combustion. It's my livelihood, it's what I know, and it's what I very much enjoy. Now, you can teach me anything. I mean, any new technology, I can figure it out, I can eventually master it, and I'll make my way. But just like transitioning away from steam, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this. There's always a trade-off there, and it seems very lopsided, and it's a shame. All the good things that we stand to lose in the name of progress.